Hi everyone, this is Aaron Larson, Executive Editor of Power Magazine, and today I'm joined by James Nyenhuis. He is the Manager of Performance Consulting for the power industry with Emerson. So James, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Aaron.
And what I'd like to talk about is analytics. And you know, we hear a lot about analytics and operational analytics. What does that term mean, and why should operators at power plants care about it?
Well, I think it's really interesting. We hear the term analytics a lot. We're hearing a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning and analytics of various natures. And I know certainly we're going to have some other talks going on here, tomorrow around what we're doing with machine learning and advanced analytics as it pertains to really understanding assets and their health and their performance and how that's evolving over time. And so I think, my thought was to spend a little bit of time taking a little different direction and saying we can, really look at some of those same analytics type concepts and apply them to operational based things with what we have and where technology is going today. And I'm thinking that really in the context of the real-time control systems that we have and really leveraging the information that's there a little bit better. And I think I was mentioning to you before we started here that I see this in a very similar way. You were so used to our phones today, as the father of 3 teenagers right now, right? Managing their phone use, right? One thing that phone is able to do for me is give me a sense of when they're using it, how often are they using it, when do they first pick it up, how much time are they spending on these different applications, where are they going, right? So it gives me a sense of how they're using that device, and that information is readily available, that our smartphones today are collecting that in the background because they have access to all that information. Essentially, I think we're seeing very similar things happening and being able to be done with the control systems today and leveraging information in ways that we really weren't able to do before.
Right. So. And I mean, you talking about the kids and having this analysis or this available information, I kind of think of it as, sometimes we have the information, but we don't know how to analyze it or don't have the time to analyze it. There's more information coming in than we can really utilize. How can power plants and operators really dive into this type of information without being overwhelmed by it?
Well, I think that's one of the big changes that's really happening. Like you said, continuing that analogy with a phone, right? Apple gives me a way to automatically see through a bar graph, right, when that device was first picked up. I would say, traditionally, we think about how we have stored and used data within the control system, right, and automation systems as a whole. I would say typically it's really been on a real-time, time-based, we're looking at a historical process value versus time, right, and that's really the context that we've looked at a lot of that information. And sometimes it might be used in the back end processing in different ways. But I would say for the operational staff, it's mostly real-time evolution analysis of the data that's there. But I think with what we're able to do now with the software constructs and what the automation system is able to do is that we can take that real-time data through what we can do with software, and we can serve that information up to a software application layer that's very closely coupled to the control system itself in a way that we have native access to all that information in a way that we can now begin to process it and look at it in different ways than just based on time.
It's interesting, that you have these analytics, and what are some of the drivers to getting it implemented and deployed in different applications?
Well, I think one of the big challenges has been in the past is really getting efficient access to large volumes of data and to be able to pull that out of a system and be able to extract it. Right? I think one of the things that we've seen is, oftentimes we might serve up that data from the live DCS or automation system into a central repository. But oftentimes we're dealing with certain things where we're compressing and we're processing that data and we lose some of that richness that if we can execute on that and operate on it, closer to the live running process, there's things that we can do that I think have some limitations as we get farther and farther away from the real live running process. And I think that, form we see some of that taking, for example, like what I would think of an example of an operational analytic is something like how much time and fuel am I using to go through, say, a start and blending process for a additional CT Hersig train that I'm trying to bring into a running process.
Okay.
Right? We can work operationally and really define known starting and ending conditions. And with that software layer that I was talking about, we really have the ability to predefine those conditions, and then we can go back and search through that rich layer of data and automatically extract that data and put it in a framework where I can maybe look back over the last 50 times that I have started that gas turbine. I've worked to blend that in with a running process and look at what those kind of operational metrics are.
And so do you see that being an opportunity for operators, for instance, from different shifts to develop similar trajectories so that they're all operating in the same manner, using the same best practices and implementing and getting to the same level of expertise? Does that help in that way?
I think it absolutely does. And I think, one of the main goals as we get around and talk to a lot of customers, one of the big drivers is, number one, looking at consistency. Right? How do I efficiently develop, a picture of operational consistency across a unit? Right? How do I look at my average hot start time for a given unit? Right? I think of something like, what is the typical time it takes me to start a pulverizer in a coal unit and work it in as I'm changing load around? Right? Those are things that with the tools that we have available today, we can really extract that data and easily create for a customer a picture of what that consistency looks like with fairly minimal effort. I think it takes a lot of collaboration with a customer to really understand what those metrics are that are meaningful to them.
And can you give any, I don't know if you have any examples, but can you give examples of improvements that have been made because of the technology and the operational analytics that you've implemented, and how maybe they've improved startup times or improved efficiency in a different plant?
Sure, and I think I want to kind of tie in one additional thing when I think of operational analytic in my mind, and it ties into that question, is something such as, we've done a lot over the last number of years and looked at alarm management and realized as we've moved to modern DCS system, the challenges with managing the alarms and that amount of information, right? And a lot of work is done, and I think really a lot of work still to be done in that area in a lot of cases that we look at. But one of the other things that we're finding is highly of value is another real operational analytics centered around something such as, let me look at how an operator is interfacing with a system. That's another layer of data that is typically stored and has been there, in a DCS system for a long time. But typically it resides in something like a text log file that isn't all that meaningful to us, right? But when I can look at something, and here's kind of the typical scenario that we get involved with. We might start by looking at that consistency and look at something like an average time to blend for a unit. And where we see outliers, right, when we really, it begs the question of, well, how much time should this really take? How much fuel should I really use to get through that process? What does good operational practice really look like, right? And then with that, we can begin to look at those outliers, but when we can marry that with a whole nother set of data, such as the operator actions associated with that, we can begin to blend something with that data, such as how much time was the operator spending manually managing that system? Was he doing it in manual? Was it all done in automatic? So we can get a picture of what that operator's interaction with the process was, and begin to peel through that data to really understand, hey, are there particular loops that the operator is always having to interface with, right? That tells me to go focus on the automation and maybe how that control was designed, so that I can help mitigate some of that and allow that type of control to serve the operations folks better when in automatic.
Okay.
So we're able to really take those different dimensions of data and bring them together when we have access to that, and have an easy way to really kind of manipulate that and look at it from different angles.
When I think about all of the data and all of the instrumentation that's in a plant, it's almost impossible for a human to really go through it all and evaluate it. Are you using AI or artificial intelligence and machine learning to help in that process in any way?
I think we absolutely are, and we're looking at things, and it kind of starts with, what do I expect to be a normal working relationship, right? For even something like a given asset type, is it operating normally or not, right? And I think it takes a given level of expertise to really set up those and leverage those technologies properly relative to the type of process and the things that I'm really interested in. But then based on that, I think we have good, efficient ways to kind of build things such as diagnostic reasoning into that and say, when I see something abnormal, how do I make a decision about where that is coming from? And when we can take things such as control loop performance and operator action evidence and blend that with what those machine learning and other algorithms are telling me, when I bring all those things together, I get a much better sense to really identify what potential root causes are. And ideally, the goal of that would be to proactively, convey to operators in quasi real time, hey, there's some potential issues that need your attention, and we want to support you with, how to potentially manage those types of issues.
Mm-hmm. And you talked a little bit about automation and how that technology is playing into the role. How has it changed over the years? Has automation become much more important in operations?
I think we're really seeing the economic drivers for that, and I think, more and more, just even hearing comments from the conference this week about, things such as we have resources that are in their 60s and resources in their 20s, and there's a disparity of some of those resources in between. I think for multiple factors, we're really having customers demanding more from the automation systems that they've invested in. And I think there's a lot of capability that we can continue to leverage there and value that we can drive for customers when we use this kind of information, right? And I think it's going to support, operators that are transitioning from some of the coal units that are beginning to retire. So we have plant management and other decision makers really looking at how do we support them. That's a fairly major change, spending 35 years at a coal unit, mm-hmm. And moving over into the combined cycle space, right? And I think technology today really allows us to embrace that level of higher automation in ways that are much more efficient than we've had the opportunity to do in the past.
And so what sort of challenges are there when implementing these types of solutions, and what are there lessons that can be learned maybe from other plants when they're utilizing these services and moving them into a new system?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we run into, and I think to fully unlock some of the capabilities that are out there, I think as customers and ourselves and as we collaborate on setting up projects, I think one of the big things that we miss is the ability to have the right framework built into the automation system itself. And an example of that is something like, in our own system, an operator action is reported based on the algorithm name that reported the action, right? I may or may not, when the system was commissioned and engineered, someone might not have determined exactly for that given algorithm, can I associate that with a particular unit, the particular system, the particular asset, and I have a direct connection that really allows me to tie all these different types of information together. I think we see similar things with alarming, right? And I think we've had to go back and really layer that type of information and structure within the system itself so that it really allows us to have these different lenses within which to view that information that's coming back. And so I think both for end users, design engineering firms, ourselves, we really need to push that we have and allocate the time it takes to really ensure that that type of structure and framework is put within the systems. And the capability is all there. I just think as an industry and in many of the projects that we've been a part of, we just haven't allocated the engineering time to really, and have that level of importance to really support that work. So I think as we're really trying to drive more value out of these type of analytics, spending some time really ensuring that that foundation is laid properly, I think is really going to help us as we move forward in these areas.
Okay. Well, I think you've touched on most of the questions I had. Is there anything important that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I just think it's a very exciting time that we're seeing. I think there's a lot of different collaboration. I think, we're seeing a lot of things that we've become used to as we started this discussion, things with smartphones and what it can track for us and this level of data, that I think we're just beginning to unlock the capabilities that we're able to derive from that information that's kind of really laid dormant for a period of time in the systems that we have. So I think it's a really exciting time to be part of what's going on and seeing that evolve.
So what I'm hearing is that we'll probably see more advancements coming down the line.
Oh, absolutely.
Much more automation and much more operational analysis that can be done.
Yeah, and really, a deeper level of understanding and really helping, support to drive, both those operational and performance and commercial objectives, that we're going to see from this industry.
All right. Well, thanks, James. It was nice talking
No problem.
to you.
I appreciate it, Aaron. Thanks so much.